The SNP swindler is sent down.
Peter Murrell, the party's former chief executive and husband of Nicola Sturgeon, has been jailed for 5 years. He embezzled more than £400,000 over 12 years, lavishing gifts with the stolen money on himself and his wife. Chris McCall is at the High Court in Edinburgh, and we'll speak to him in a moment. Paul Hutchin will also bring us the latest political reaction from Holyrood later on. But first, let's hear from the judge, Lord Young, at this morning's hearing.
If you had been found guilty of this charge after trial, I would have imposed a sentence of 7 years imprisonment. Having pled guilty at the preliminary hearing, I impose a sentence of 5 years, 3 months imprisonment. I shall backdate that sentence to the 25th of May 2026, when you're first remanded in custody. That is all.
And Peter Murrell, once a towering figure in Scottish politics, is led away. Chris McCall is outside the High Court in Edinburgh. Hello, Chris. Can you tell us what you saw in court today?
Hi, so I'm standing outside the High Court in Edinburgh's High Street, as you can see, where we've just had the conclusion of probably the most dramatic and one of the most long-running episodes in recent Scottish political history. Peter Murrell, the former long-serving chief executive of the SNP, who last month pled guilty to embezzling more than £400,000 from his employers, was today jailed for more than 5 years. The judge, Lord Young, said that Murrell had been unable to stop his offending, and it was only the detection of his crime that brought it to an end. And the judge also told Murrell that the length of his sentence was designed to act as a deterrent to anyone else that might be in a similar position of authority, to basically say, look, we can't tolerate this kind of repeat offending. I mean, just to remind ourselves, I mean, this was a huge amount of money taken over a 12-year period between August 2010 and October 2022. Used it to make hundreds of extravagant purchases, obviously the infamous motorhome, cars, jewellery, luxury goods and other items. Lord Young said it had been a calculated crime of dishonesty, the large number of fraudulent acts. And Murrell stood there, didn't react in the dock and was taken down, and he'll return back to HMMP Dumfries, which is going to be his home for the next few years at least.
Now, John Skillen, Casey, was making the plea in mitigation this morning. Did he offer any rationale, any kind of reasoning or an attempt to excuse Murrell's embezzlement over that 12-year period?
Well, the mitigation talked a lot about the feelings of shame and embarrassment that Murrell now feels. But these were all kind of feelings that Murrell has after the fact. In terms of explanations for the pattern of, offending, the amount of things he bought, why he bought them, when he bought them, I've kind of heard remarkably little. And that was something that the judge did pick up on as well. In his sentencing, he said he really found it inexplicable, and there hasn't really been a satisfactory explanation to kind of, because as the judge himself said, many of the items that Murrell bought were never used. They just sat in boxes around his home. Some of them just sat around the SNP HQ in Edinburgh. We can assume that maybe some of them were given out as gifts, but we really don't know. So there is a lot of unanswered questions just about why Peter Murrell did what he did.
You've also been in the court all morning, and Peter Murrell was a towering figure in Scottish politics. What was the atmosphere like? Was there any chat about his downfall and what's transpired?
Peter Murrell absolutely was a towering figure in Scottish politics, but the important thing to remember is outside of the upper echelons of the SNP, he was a completely unknown figure. He was somebody that you would see overseeing the lanyards being handed out at the SNP annual conference. That's not to say that he restricted himself to petty items of administration. It's more just to illustrate that this was a man that was on top of every element of what the SNP was doing behind the scenes. He was involved at the lowest level, he was involved at the top level. But I mean, certainly in my time reporting on Scottish politics, there really wasn't much said about Peter Murrell other than he'd been in the job a very long time, and it was maybe slightly unusual that the party had allowed him to carry on as the CEO, while at the same time, Nicola Sturgeon, of course, was the long-serving party leader. And that's obviously something that John Swinney himself now says that he regrets. I think a lot of other people in the SNP regret that as well, that they never separated those two roles from, outside of one married home. But just to repeat a point I made earlier, I think there is still bafflement in some quarters about just why Murrell carried on like this, and also legitimate questions about why other senior SNP figures didn't spot this sooner and didn't intervene to get a grip on it.
Chris McCall, the High Court in Edinburgh, thank you for joining us this morning. Paul Hutchin, the Daily Record's political editor, joins us from Holyrood. Paul, what's been the reaction to this sentencing this morning among Scotland's political classes?
So reaction is dribbling through. I think the first leader to comment was the Scottish Conservative leader, Russell Finlay, who's been all over this case. He welcomed the fact that Peter Murrell had been brought to justice for his crimes, but did pose the question that many people are asking, how exactly did he get away with this brazen and large-scale crime spree? I think that's something that we're still none the wiser to. And also the Lord Advocate, the new Lord Advocate, Ruth Charteris, she's also released a statement insisting that she played no part in the investigation. I think that's quite a telling comment, because there's been all sorts of claims that there's a conflict of interest in the Lord Advocate also being a member of the Scottish Government. If you recall, her predecessor, Dorothy Bain, was accused of tipping off John Swinney about the timings and what of in relation to the case. So her statement opens with a sort of statement of her own independence, but then paying tribute to the police and all the criminal justice authorities who brought Peter Murrell to justice. I think it would have to be said, though, that it's good to have Russell Finlay's views, but the people we're really waiting for are John Swinney, the current leader of the SNP, and also Nicola Sturgeon, who was SNP leader at the time of her estranged husband's embezzlement. I think we really want to see what she's got to say about this jail sentence of 5 years and 3 months.
Indeed. Now, there have been calls for an inquiry all the way through this. Do you think what we heard today, or what we didn't hear today, because that plea in mitigation didn't really contain much around motivation or anything else, do you think those calls for inquiry might intensify?
They'll definitely intensify. So where we're at with that is that Holyrood, which is led by the SNP and the Greens, there's an SNP Green majority in the Scottish Parliament, they've closed the door to a Holyrood investigation. And so the focus is now on Westminster. Will they go for their own probe? Now, my understanding, I was at Westminster last week, their preference right now is for a joint Holyrood and Westminster probe. I think there'll be some sort of offering made to the Scottish Parliament to do it together. I would imagine that will be firmly rejected, and then it will be up to Westminster to go their own way. And I know for a fact there is a significant appetite on the Scottish Affairs Committee at Westminster to launch an investigation into public money aspects of the Peter Murrell embezzlement scandal.
And really, does their direction or the existence or not of that inquiry, does that determine the likely fallout, or is there going to be more around this story in the days and weeks ahead, do you think?
Well, I think this could be still a story in the next decade. It's a big moment today, Peter Murrell getting jailed for over 5 years, but that is just the beginning as far as I'm concerned. You've got proceeds of crime action that's been lodged. That's going to take a long time to resolve in terms of the repayment of funds to the SNP. You've got a potential civil action by victims whose money was robbed by Peter Murrell. I think Sean Clarkin, who made the original police complaint about this, he said that he would support and encourage people to take the SNP to court over what happened to their IndyRef 2 donations. And of course, there's that Westminster inquiry as well, which could run deep into 2027. So it may feel like today was a full stop, but I suspect it will just be a comma.
More, as they say, to follow. Paul Hutchin in Holyrood and Chris McCall, who was with us earlier from outside the High Court in Edinburgh. Thank you both very much.